Welcome to the Channelchek Takeaway Series. This program is provided for informational purposes only, and none of its content should be interpreted as a recommendation or solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investment decisions must be made by you or with the support of your financial advisor. A complete disclosure statement follows each presentation. ZyVersa Therapeutics, NASDAQ ticker symbol ZVSA, is a clinical stage specialty biopharmaceutical company leveraging advanced proprietary technologies to develop first-in-class drugs. Their focus is on patients with renal or inflammatory diseases who have significant unmet medical needs. Joining us today is ZyVersa Co-Founder, Chairman, President, and CEO Stephen Glover. Following a brief introduction to the company, Stephen will be joined by Noble Senior Research Analyst Robert LeBoyer for a Q&A. Take it away, Stephen.
Great, and good morning and good afternoon to many of you. I wanted to take this time to thank everyone for spending some time with us today to kind of review our thoughts and my thoughts from the JPM meeting. In addition, I give you an update on ZyVersa and kind of what 2023 looks like for us. So let me say it was really nice to be back at JPM, meet and see a whole host of groups and companies and people interested in the biosciences industry. I would say from my general view, for us as a company, we went public in December of 2022. It was a great chance for us to catch up with people we've been talking about in person. I think it was really interesting to see the tone at the meeting. I think the environment is really improving. A lot of interest around what we are doing and in the space, particularly around the inflammasome area of which we are at. But I thought the other thing was that there was a clear desire to invest in novel technologies. I think that's the important piece I walked away from JPM, was this ability and the desire from many people, both strategic as well as investors, to really focus on things that can make a difference. And that's nice. It kind of reminded me of the days when immuno-oncology was just starting off, or CAR T therapies or genetic therapies. And I think, as you'll hear from us, the inflammasome is clearly one of those opportunities. There was a little bit of conversation, I think, about the IRA legislation, and I think it'll be interesting in 2023 to see how that shakes out. What I thought I'd do is just share with you, obviously, some of our programs and approaches for 2023, and a little bit of a forward look, as you can expect. So in general, our company is really well positioned in the public markets here, we believe. We've got a nice set of two platforms, one in the renal disease area and one in the inflammatory area, with some highly differentiated mechanisms of actions, really innovative therapies, and most importantly, from my perspective and the investor perspective, targeted really at unmet medical needs. And to do something like this, obviously, we licensed both of these products from the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and we spent the last 5 years getting to the stages we're going to review today. When you're doing something like this, it's really much more than the products. It's really the team and your board of directors and your scientific advisors. You really need a community to drive that forward. And I'm happy to say in 2023, we've got everything in place to make it a successful year for ZyVersa. Just a quick snapshot here, and I'll drill down on this just a little bit during our overview. But we really have two excellent programs here. The unmet medical needs in the renal space are really significant. There hasn't really been any innovation or products approved in the renal space since I was at Amgen and EPO was brought to the market. So in general, we're focused in on three potential indications. Two are orphan indications, FSGS and Alport syndrome. And the third is, right at the pandemic issues in the United States with kidney disease, diabetic kidney disease, or some people refer to as chronic kidney disease. We've been cleared to move into our human clinical trials, and we're really excited to begin those experiences in 2023. On the right-hand side, just to give some context, is kind of the milestones for the year. We'll initiate our investigator-initiated trials in 2023, late second half, with initial data sets late in 2023 and initial patients And then throughout the first quarter of 2024, we'll begin to see additional patient data. In our inflammasome program, we have a really unique differentiated approach here with targeting a monoclonal antibody at a portion of the inflammasome called ASC or ASC. We've really spent a lot of time in the last year and a half bringing this program forward to be ready to move from preclinical into IND stage through 2023. So in general, we think it's really a great opportunity here to be able to move several indications forward. Our two lead indications are multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis and acute respiratory distress syndrome. One is an acute disease, and obviously the other one is a chronic disease. We're also moving forward right now, our Parkinson's effort with the University of Miami and the Michael J. Fox Foundation, where we're looking at collaboration to look at how our product IC100 will perform in animal models in Parkinson's disease. And we've initially published some really intriguing information around early stage Alzheimer's disease, and you can expect to see additional information on that in 2023 as well. One of the other efforts will be expanding this platform of indications. We'll be looking at IgA neuropathy, Huntington's disease, and congestive heart failure in 2023, running initial preclinical animal model work to see if what we expected and have seen in some of our early work is productive in the animal model work as well. From a milestone perspective, very straightforward. We've got a lot to do to get through our pre-IND preclinical work, leading towards our pre-IND meeting towards the end of this year or the first quarter of 2024. With that clearance, we'll look to move into our phase 1 study in 2024 in the inflammasome area. Just to give you context, as you look at these indication sets, there's a total available market of approximately $70 billion, of which about 60 billion of that is in the inflammasome program, and a little bit more than $10 billion in the indication sets that we're looking at for our renal program. Let's transition, give you a little detail related to the renal program. It's really an innovative approach to the transference of cholesterol in and out of cells around a structure called a podocyte. We refer to it as VAR200 or cholesterol efflux mediator program. So what is the issue here that's taking place? As I briefly mentioned, this is really in some ways a real pandemic in the United States. Over 18% of our Medicare budget, or close to $50 million, is spent in the treatment of kidney diseases. And unfortunately, as I briefly mentioned, very little progress and innovation has taken place in this area since over the last 20 years. One of the key issues that's become very clear is the impact of this lipid accumulation around a structure in the kidney called a podocyte. And this lipid accumulation is really important in this diagnostic and its approach to what's taking place. These foamy lipids that take place around the podocytes are really important from the perspective of the progression of kidney disease and renal disease. As you take a look here, it's really simple conceptually what's happening in here, but really important and hard to be able to find a treatment to move this forward. This accumulation of podocyte lipids contributes to the structural damage, proteinuria, and the progression of kidney disease. Graphically, what it looks like is podocyte lipid accumulation takes place. This podocyte structure becomes distorted, and then it leads to increased susceptibility to damaging the foot process, which attaches the podocyte to the basement membrane of the kidney. When this podocyte detachment takes place, you gain podocyte loss, you impair your filtration barrier, and you move towards nephrotic syndrome, which over a period of 5 to 7 years leads to end-stage dialysis and kidney transplant. And on the right-hand side here, you'll see an intact podocyte structure in the kidney on the basement membrane. And then when the disease progresses, you see a loss of these podocytes and effacement, which leads to protein leakage. So our product really is set up and comprised of an approach to extract cholesterol and lipids from the cells surrounding the podocyte and restore the function of those cells to help keep them healthy and keep the podocyte intact and attached to the basement membrane. We think we have a really unique approach to doing this. In our early stage research that we have done, we've had some really successful approaches here in our early stage preclinical research. So far, we've got a really nice program here moving into phase 2 in the human trial. We have a very differentiated MOA. Currently, no drugs in the pipeline other than ours are targeting this issue of renal intercellular lipids. We know from our preclinical work that we can moderate and the movement of both passive and active cholesterol pathways. And by doing this, and at least in our animal work so far, this removal of excess cholesterol and lipids has shown the potential to delay progression of renal energy and reduce proteinuria. It's a very safe product so far in our preclinical animal models. Well, we've gotten clearance from the FDA, as I mentioned, to move into phase 2. And we do think from an investor perspective, we're well positioned as the only drug in the class in a great unmet medical need. So in summary on the VAR200 program, we're unique in that we target renal lipids. I think innovation is really important here. We've shown and expect to slow progression of renal disease. Our preclinical work has validated our approach in FSGS and outports in DKD. As I mentioned, it's a very robust market as well. We've got a nice safety profile. And most importantly, for 2023, towards the end of the year, we'll begin to see initial patient data. Transitioning to our second program is our inflammasome inhibitor program, which is highly differentiated and novel. And the feedback at JPM was just that, a really differentiated approach to a new target class that has become an important target within the pharmaceutical industry. We have gone about our entry into this area in a very different way by targeting a monoclonal antibody and a component of the inflammasome called ASC. Here's a brief overview of why this is important, and I think why the innovation part of this has been recognized as being significant here. A few years ago, about 10 years ago, the inflammasome was discovered and research began, and it really centered on the initial view of an NLRP3 inflammasome. And that was the first known inflammasome that was researched. The way to think about inflammasome is when you get a bacterial or a viral infection, or you have a disease where you're getting cell death due to inflammation, there's two components of the inflammasome that initially gets formed. The sensor molecule, which you'll see here is named NLRP3. It attracts a component called ASC or ASC, which attracts caspase-1. This is what is typically named as an inflammasome, and it is named by its sensor molecule. What's important to understand is left unchecked or unattenuated, you begin to produce significant amounts of IL-1 beta and IL-18, which are cytokines which drive the inflammatory process in the human body. What has since happened since the early research is become known now that there are 12 or more types of inflammasomes that are required to be inhibited to manage diseases such as MS, lupus, Alzheimer's, IBS, etc. What's also become very important here is that the acute phase of the initiation of inflammation and the chronic stage of inflammation here is both important to treat. And as important, and I think really definitive here, has been the discovery that in certain diseases, it's more than one inflammasome. And that's really important to understand, that you need to inhibit multiple inflammasomes to have a nice therapeutic clinical outcome. From that perspective, as you get a virus or a bacteria, in this example, you activate within the cell an inflammasome. And in this case, it's an example of NLRP3. And as that inflammasome is activated in the cell, it also creates what's called the ASC spec. As I mentioned, as the cell progresses with an inflammatory cascade driven by the two cytokines, it dies and it releases an organism or a structure called the ASC spec. This ASC spec then gets into tissues and fluids. It polymerizes and grows much larger, and left untreated, it leads to the perpetuation of inflammation. Currently, Our product IC100 is targeting the ASC component with a monoclonal antibody, which allows us to inhibit multiple inflammasomes. And most importantly to us is be able to inhibit it not only in the initiation of acute inflammation, but also in the chronic stage by targeting the ASC spec. So really a lot of progress that we made in 2022, and 2023 is a big year for us. We have a validated target, a significant amount of peer-reviewed literature validating our approach, and most importantly, a recently released MOA paper demonstrating how we're looking and how we're approaching our disease states such as MS, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's. In addition to that, we got a companion biomarker, which is a very important program. So you can begin to look at inflammation cascades from looking at baseline ASC and then the elevation of ASC in patients. And a very significant market. I mean, one of the things that attracted me here to this area was the unmet medical needs, the desire to treat inflammation early in the innate immune side, and just a huge opportunity for multiple indication expansion, which is what we have. And quite frankly, is what is drawing the interest of many strategics to the tune of about $5 billion worth of M&A and licensing and preclinical. In other words, really a target that strategics, big pharma, are very interested in. As part of our program, really a great step forward here in safety. We've completed our initial safety work. We've done work in the EAE model in MS that demonstrated not only effectiveness in that model, but also no inflammation, immunosuppression driven by inflammation or the use of our drug. We've done early work in immunogenicity testing for our biologic. It looks really clinically beneficial. And initial toxicology studies have been done in 2 species, non-human primate, as well as rodents. We've used doses up to 300 milligram per kilogram. That's a large dose of a monoclonal antibody. And our target dose range is 15 to 30 megs. Most importantly, as we decided where to move forward in our indication strategy, we now have completed our preclinical work that shows that the product moves across the blood-brain barrier. It penetrates the brain and spinal cord. In addition to that, in the non-CNS area, great distribution to liver, lung, kidneys, heart, over, and thyroid. So really we believe a really significant innovation here, a great compound. It's got a long projected half-life compared to the small molecule inhibitors, and the ability to treat acute and chronic stages of inflammation. I think one of the interesting things in our industry is what happens when you see a target like this, which is really innovative. And as I mentioned briefly, there's been about $5 billion worth of M&A activity, mostly in the preclinical stage in companies that were formed. Many of the companies that were formed early were small molecule companies targeting NLRP3 only. And we are the first company targeting the ASC component with a monoclonal antibody. Recent deals, just to give you context, took place the fall of 2022 with Takeda and Merck with Ceravance, and then just most recently in September, Novo Nordisk and Ventus. So I think the take-home message here as an investor is this is a hot target within the industry. We are well positioned. We're a public company, and I think a great investment thesis for you to consider. So in general, in the IC100 market opportunity, we've got a highly differentiated, novel, innovative program that blocks the initiation, perpetuation of inflammation. We're targeting multiple indications. We've got a great safety profile so far, and a great significant opportunity here. We already have released our composition of matter patent, so we're in a good shape from a patent portfolio perspective. And in 2023, it's really straightforward for us. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing our initial human experience with our VAR200 program with initial data sets late in the year. And then getting through our final preclinical studies where we'll be really 2 key exercises. The manufacturing of GMP and clinical supplies will be completed with that in February of this year. And we'll then initiate our final GLP toxicology studies, which are really a repeat of our preliminary studies, just a week longer in the same protocol. That allows us to do our research expansion, look to meet with the agency in a pre-IND meeting towards the end of the year, and look to move forward into phase 1 in 2024. So that's a brief overview of what we're looking to do. The summary here is it's a great opportunity, and we hope you're interested in taking a look at our company.
That sounded like a really interesting description of what you're doing in both the renal and the inflammation areas. Inflammasomes sound like a really interesting field, and there seems to be a lot of activity with the early stage companies from large pharma. Have there been any drugs approved or clinical successes that you can point to as something that has a similar mechanism of action that ZyVersa might be able to improve upon or broaden the effect?
That's a great question, Robert. I think, this is an emerging area, and maybe a little history here. About 5 years ago, where this all started was out of the results from a Novartis trial called CANTOS, where they were approaching blocking IL-1 beta in several different diseases. And the output of that trial was very interesting, and it led to a lot of innovation and investment coming into the inflammasome space. And the early stage companies really started looking at the NLRP3 molecule as blocking that with a small molecule inhibitor. And I think initially what you're seeing is a lot of this early M&A activity was acquisition of those companies as they were transitioning from preclinical to phase 1. You've had a couple of companies report out on phase 1, in late 2022. I think there's a transition that will take place from phase 1 into phase 2 in 2023 and 2024. I think it'll be interesting to see where those results are reported out, since obviously many of these programs have been acquired into big companies. But I think it positions us as a really innovative program by taking an approach that is very different by targeting multiple inflammasomes. And I think it's exciting from our perspective to move forward our programs into phase 1 as well.
Very interesting. One of the things that you mentioned was the neuroscience field and Alzheimer's. With the recent approval of lecanemab, there seems to be a lot more interest in Alzheimer's disease. And this is suddenly seen as something that was incurable to something that now has an approved drug that can be effective. So this typically turns the tide and gets both more investor interest as well as research activity in the field. You mentioned Alzheimer's disease, which most approaches focus on amyloid beta or tau as late-stage lesions in the disease, even though there are many parallel processes going on, including inflammation. Could you discuss some of the things going on in inflammation and how your program might address Alzheimer's or other neurodegenerative diseases?
Sure. And a lot of feedback from JPM on this one as well. It's very interesting. That's what I love about our industry is, you go after these hard, incurable, we think, diseases, and then breakthroughs take place. And then all of a sudden investment flows and innovation takes place. And I think what's interesting here is neuroinflammation is now seeing a significant amount of focus from big pharma and other companies, including companies like ourselves. This whole process of chronic low-grade transitioning into high-grade inflammation as a precursor to many neural diseases, including diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, I think is a great area for exploration. You're seeing many of the inflammasome companies focusing in on indications such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, given this. And I think, like everything, when you see a drug approved in a space, you're going to begin to think about combination therapies. You're going to think about how you manage a multifactorial disease like Alzheimer's. And I think it's going to just be exciting to see the research. And we're just proud to be in the middle of it.
Yeah, completely agreed. And when Biogen had the first drug for multiple sclerosis, the field expanded exactly the way you just said it would. We saw more research, more drugs being developed for different mechanisms of action, both alone and in combination. So I see that as a breakthrough in the field.
Yeah, we're hopeful too.
So yeah, okay, great. Could you go over some of the milestones that can be expected in the coming year?
Sure. So 2023 is a big year for us. It sets up a lot of our focus to getting into 24 in a huge transition year for us. In 2023, with our lead program, VAR 200, it's really moving into our first clinical experience in humans. And we're really taking, I think, a novel approach in doing investigator-initiated trials. We'll have some output of that probably late this year from some initial patients in the trials. We'll be testing our thesis, in diseases like FSGS and Alport's minimal change disease, perhaps in FSG post-transplant where you get reoccurrence. Again, today, no treatments there. So we think it's a great year for us, drives some data and success and accelerate off of that. On the inflammasome side, it's a watershed year for us. We're really moving forward quickly here. As I mentioned briefly, we'll have clinical material manufactured. We'll do our GLP tox and do some indication expansion. And we look to be sitting with the FDA towards the end of this year, getting an open IND, moving into phase 1. And that's where a lot of collaboration takes place in this space, given the importance of that next stage of indication selection. So a great year for us in 2023.
Yes, really interesting science and some interesting milestones to drive the stock. Steve, thank you very much. This has been a great, interesting discussion.
Thanks, Robert. Always a pleasure.
With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then Channelchek truly is your trade. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series luncheons, and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Microcap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since Channelchek is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why Channelchek is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.